All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Antiwar Radio. I'm Scott, and now it's time once again to talk to Gareth Porter, independent historian and journalist. He writes for IPSnews.net and antiwar.com. That's original.antiwar.com/Porter. I think if you just do antiwar.com/Porter, it'll forward you right on. And now I've been interviewing Gareth since January 2007, the introduction of the surge, the replacement of Rumsfeld by Gates, and the beginning of a massive new propaganda push against Iran, not based on their nuclear weapons, but at that time based on their involvement in Iraq, supporting our enemies in Iraq, responsible for everything wrong in Iraq. And from the very first time I talked to Gareth, he set me straight about a number of things, and that's why I've interviewed him more than any other guest on this show, almost 100 times now, probably, maybe more than that. Welcome back to the show, Gareth.
Thanks, Scott. Good morning to you.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Good morning. Good to talk to you. So this is the subject of the interview today, is 2007, and what really happened in this Iraq war. It's a complicated article today. Leaked report, new Iraqi alignment reveal U.S. war failure. And that's at the top of antiwar.com right now, our top headline. So go ahead, give us your thesis, and then back it up, and I'll get back to my follow-up questions when I can.
Sure. Well, this is a story I originally intended to write a response to Michael Gordon's piece in the New York Times, his coverage of that aspect of the WikiLeaks documents on Iraq, which of course he was interested in, which is the Iranian role in Iraq. Now, just for a very quick reminder, for those who have not followed Michael Gordon in the past or have forgotten about Michael Gordon, he, more than anyone else, the New York Times, was pushing the idea that Iran was behind all the violence by the Shia militias, that it's not just Shia militias, it's special groups organized and manipulated, armed, trained by Iran, who have broken away from the Mahdi Army of Moqtada al-Sadr and have become sort of independent but Iranian manipulated actors in the Iraq war. This was the idea that he was pushing, and of course it coincided with the line taken by General Petraeus. But Michael Gordon was particularly aggressive in pushing that, and I have a little story about that, which, if we have time, we can get back to it. So I was interested in Michael Gordon's story about the WikiLeaks documents, in which he basically suggests that these documents reinforce the line that he and General Petraeus had been putting forward in 2007, 2008, that this was a proxy war that Iran was waging through these special groups of rogue Shia militias, and that was what Petraeus was up against, and that he had to use U.S. military force to basically beat down these rogue militias. Now, and of course, I have been trying to document the case that this was essentially a massive lie to justify U.S. military force in Iraq during that period. And what then, when I got deeply into this story, as I really looked at the documents closely, the WikiLeaks documents, what I found was that, in fact, there was a bigger story here, and that is that this particular key document that he leads with, that is Michael Gordon leads with, actually proves precisely the opposite. It proves that, in fact, the commander of the Karbala operation of January 2007, which Michael Gordon, suggests in his article, was in fact an Iranian job using these special groups. He doesn't use the term, but that's clearly the implication. Was in fact, it was a Mahdi Army operation all the way from the beginning. And this commander, who Michael Gordon does not identify as a Mahdi Army commander, is identified very clearly in the WikiLeaks document, the December 2006 document, as a subordinate of a senior Mahdi Army commander. So I took that new piece of information and fitted it together with other information that I have accumulated over the last 2 or 3 years, and showed in my new article that what actually happened in January 2007 in this operation in Karbala, January 20th, 2007, in which 5 American soldiers were kidnapped and ultimately killed, is that there was a tripartite alignment of cooperation going on here. This is a reflection of a covert level of cooperation between the al-Maliki regime, the Mahdi Army of Moqtada al-Sadr, and the Iranians. And I say this because the U.S. military did their own independent investigation of what happened in Karbala, and contrary to the official line that this was just an Iranian job manipulating special groups, they found that the 2 leading officials of the government in Karbala, that is the province chief and the chief of police, were both in on the job. They were both well aware of what was happening and were clearly cooperating with it. Now, the province chief is a member of the Dawa party, which, of course, is Nouri al-Maliki's party, and he was nominated by Nouri al-Maliki himself, clearly somebody who was taking orders from the center in terms of his treatment of the Mahdi Army and what to do about their operation. So what we see here is revealed the real situation that existed in early 2007, where al-Maliki and the Mahdi Army were still very, very closely cooperating to try to prevent the U.S. military from suppressing the Mahdi Army, which is what they had clearly telegraphed their intention as being in early 2007. One of the major purposes of the surge was not to crush the Sunnis, because they already had the idea, I think, that they were going to try to come to some sort of that is, the U.S. military had the idea they'd come to some sort of agreement with the Sunnis, but to crush the Mahdi Army, to use force to try to weaken it as much as possible and to see if they couldn't break it up. And, of course, the al-Maliki regime didn't want that to happen, because Sadr was one of the most important, he was the single most important ally of al-Maliki in the government. He had 30 members of the parliament. He had provided the votes to get al-Maliki elected prime minister in April 2006, in a meeting, by the way, that was presided over by General Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force of Iran. So there you have, in 2007, the perfect illustration of the real covert cooperation among Iran, the Mahdi Army, and Nouri al-Maliki. And now, of course, we see, in 2010, the same alignment reappearing, with al-Maliki asking Iran to help get Sadr to become part of his alignment of aiming at getting enough votes to re-elect Nouri al-Maliki as Prime Minister of Iraq. Of course, al-Maliki has just visited Iran, gone to Qom, where he met with Sadr, and during that trip thanked the Iranian government for its help in restoring, I believe the word was, brotherhood, and of course in helping to move him a step closer to getting reelected as Prime Minister. So that's the story in a nutshell. A big nutshell, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, well, no, that's okay. So there's a few things to go over there. First of all, it sounds like really you're saying that Michael Gordon is not that far off if the deal was, we'll make a deal with the Sunnis, and our enemy is only the Sadrs, and the Sadrs, the entire Mahdi Army is working with the Iranians under Sadr, and it's not the special groups. It sounds almost like you're quibbling. And I guess music's playing, so we'll have to get back to that on the other side of this break. Hold it there, Gareth. All right, everybody, Gareth Porter's on the line. Antiwar Radio. The article is Leaked Report. New Iraqi Alignment. Reveal U.S. war failure. Now, just to focus on one part of this, Gareth, you say that in that whole thing, Michael Gordon's entire shtick, which, by the way, one other thing about him, he co-authored every lie that Judith Miller ever wrote in the New York Times to get us into this war, with maybe one or two articles accepted. He was a co-author of almost all of those.
Right, he has a dual role there, you're correct.
Yeah, and he also was pushing, as part of this, which I don't want to divert off into this, but part of this story was the only way that an Arab could make a bomb with a copper core in it is if Iran was supplying them all, because I guess Persians are smarter or something, even though it was a proven fact 10 million times that those EFP new improved landmines, basically homemade landmines, were being made at home. They were homemade in Iraq. And as you and Phil Giraldi and so many others documented, they got the technology really by way of Hezbollah, and it was Iraqis that were doing it. Patrick Coburn was the first one to write about a factory that was making these kind of bombs. So, Michael Gordon has earned his disrespect. But now, it seems to me like you're quibbling with him on this little point, which I never really understood the whole point here anyway. David Petraeus says, yes, we're fighting parts of the Mahdi Army, which are pro-Iranian. Well, America had driven Moqtada al-Sadr into Iran's arms. He was much more of a nationalist, much more willing to work with the Sunnis and the Kurds before, and opposed Iran and the Supreme Islamic Council's plan to create a southern Shiistan in alliance with Iran. And I guess after years of being targeted and having his people killed, he finally went and moved to Iran, I guess to get his higher religious rank as part of that. And so you're saying, yeah, and the Mahdi Army that Petraeus was trying to crack down on, which was such an important part of Muqtada al-Sadr, Nouri al-Maliki's coalition, keeping him prime minister, they wanted to crack down, so they tried to say that the ones that they were fighting against were the special groups, but so what? I mean, they didn't want to say we're taking on the whole Mahdi Army, because then they would have had to take on more of it maybe, and the thing would have escalated more. And one other thing, one other thing here too, I know you're smart enough to remember all this stuff. One other thing too is that you wrote then, and we talked then about how Maliki's surprise attack against Sadr at the end of the spring, I think maybe the beginning of the summer, May, June or so, of 2007 was actually an attempt to preempt what Dick Cheney's plan was and Petraeus' plan was, which was to have a major, real offensive against the Mahdi Army that summer. And that by starting that fight,
that's 2008.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what happened in 2008, and of course it is an important part of this story.
That was the summer 2008. Is that what you said? Not 7?
It was spring. It was March. It was March of 2008. When
I'm sorry, I don't know why. Why did I think that was in 2007 in the lead up to Sadr's declaring the ceasefire in August?
Well, the ceasefire in August was preliminary. That was before the next round.
Dang it! All right, I'm sorry for getting the years screwed up there.
Okay. So the point that you're raising about whether this is a quibble or not, the difference is this. You're right that from the American point of view, it really didn't make any difference because Sadr was the enemy, the Mahdi Army, the Jaish al-Mahdi was the enemy. And so, from that point of view, it didn't matter. But from the point of view of standing from outside and understanding the situation, of course, it makes all the difference whether the conflict here was one in which the Iranians were splitting off or taking split-off groups and forming them into their own instrument for influence in Iraq, or whether, in fact, what was happening was that as you put it correctly, the main political military force that was helping to keep the Nouri al-Maliki government in power was, in fact, the real problem for the United States, and that both al-Maliki and Sadr were, at one level at least, cooperating with Iran to the extent that the Iranians were favoring that close relationship, continued close relationship between them, and of course did not want the United States to be able to suppress the Mahdi Army as part of its strategy for maintaining a long-term presence. And so it's the difference, if I could just try to summarize it in just a few words, is between the special groups line, which is that this is an intervention by Iran to work